My 32nd birthday was the night I finally understood exactly what I was worth in my own family. The restaurant wasn't fancy. Not the kind with white tablecloths and a piano in the corner, but it was nice. The kind of place people use for birthdays and small celebrations. I'd picked it myself, made the reservation myself, and I was paying the bill myself. That was already normal for me. If there was a family gathering, more often than not, I was the one who pulled out his card. My parents were there, my younger sister and her husband, aunts, uncles, cousins, around 20 people in total. I told myself I wanted to celebrate with family. That was my mistake. The evening started off fine. Small talk floating above the clink of glasses. A few jokes. Some light teasing. Nothing out of the ordinary. My sister sat across from me, her husband right beside her. She was 4 months pregnant, and she kept touching her belly in that very deliberate way people sometimes do when they want to make sure nobody forgets. Every time she did, my mother's eyes softened, filled with that familiar glowing pride. I knew that look. I'd grown up watching that look. It showed up whenever my sister did anything at all. Straight A on a test? That look. School award for most improved? That look. My own solid, unremarkable. B grades had been met with lectures about wasted potential, and you could do better if you just tried. Her college graduation had been a full event. Big hall. Dozens and dozens of guests, decorations, speeches. Mine? A low-key dinner at a chain restaurant. No speeches, no pride. When she got engaged, my parents threw her a party that cost more than my entire wedding. They didn't contribute a cent to my wedding, by the way. I told myself for years that I wasn't keeping score. I was. Every memory was sitting in the back of my mind, quietly waiting. The food arrived. I was halfway through my steak when my father stood up. He isn't a tall man, but when he wants attention, he knows exactly how to get it. He tapped his fork against his glass until the whole table went quiet. I thought, stupidly, that maybe, just this once, he was about to say something about me, something kind, something fatherly. I should have known better. He cleared his throat and looked straight at me. Then, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, he said, "We've all been talking, and we all agree you should sell your house and give the money to your sister's baby fund. She needs it more than you do." For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. My house? The 3-bedroom bungalow I'd saved for years to buy. The one I'd spent weekends painting, sanding floors, fixing things with my own hands. The first real, solid, tangible thing in my life that was truly mine. He wanted me to sell it and hand the money over. The reaction around the table was instant. My cousin started cheering as if he'd just announced an open bar. One aunt nodded vigorously and said something about, "This is what family does." An uncle lifted his glass like it was a done deal. My mother looked at me with this bright, expectant smile, as if I should feel honored to be part of such a noble plan. My sister dabbed at the corners of her eyes. Fake tears. I'd seen those 100 times growing up, usually right before I got in trouble for something she'd actually done. Her husband wrapped his arm around her shoulders and stared at me with a mixture of hope and entitlement that made my stomach twist. And me? I sat there, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. Everything inside me suddenly very, very quiet. There was a rising hum of voices. My sister's medical bills. How expensive babies were. How I was divorced now. Living alone in a whole house. Like that was some sort of crime. Someone pointed out that I made good money and could easily help. The important part wasn't just what they were saying. It was what they hadn't done. No one had called me beforehand to talk. No one had asked what I could afford or how I felt. They'd gathered. They'd discussed my home, my finances, my life, without me. Then they'd chosen my birthday, at a dinner I was paying for, to corner me. I put my fork down very carefully. My hands were shaking, and I didn't want anyone to see. I took a long drink of water, then another. The table started to quiet down again. waiting for my response. My sister had a tiny, confident smile on her lips, the look of someone who already knows how the story ends. But my family didn't know everything. They didn't know what I'd overheard. They didn't know what I'd already found. They didn't know how far this had already gone. 3 months earlier, I'd started to get suspicious. Little things, odd comments, numbers that didn't look right. So I started to dig. What I'd discovered changed everything. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hand was steady now. The shock had melted into something colder, sharper. I scrolled through my emails until I found the one I wanted. The one that had come in that very morning. Perfect timing. I stood up. The table went silent again. "I'd like to make a toast too," I said, lifting my glass. My voice sounded calm, almost relaxed. My father sat down, satisfied. My mother was still smiling. My sister leaned forward. "I got an interesting email from the bank this morning," I said. "I think you should all hear it." And then I started reading. The first line confirmed that my final mortgage payment had cleared. My home was now fully, officially mine. No bank, no lien, no debt. Current estimated market value, about $450,000. Somebody's fork slipped and hit their plate. A glass clinked too hard against the table. But I wasn't finished. The email went on to reference another matter, a loan application that had been declined. A $300,000 loan, to be exact. Declined because the bank discovered fraudulent information on the application. Specifically, someone had listed me as a co-signer and guarantor without my knowledge or consent. That someone was my sister and her husband. I watched my sister's face drain of color. Her husband suddenly found his plate fascinating. My mother's smile didn't fade so much as shatter slowly, piece by piece. I kept reading. I explained to the table that 2 months earlier, my credit score had dropped suddenly for no reason I could see. That drop had led me to check my credit reports, my accounts, everything. Here's what I found. New credit card applications in my name. Personal loan attempts, also in my name. A car lease, with my sister's address as the secondary contact. Every one of them tied back to her. To them, I told them I'd already filed a police report. I'd hired a lawyer. I'd contacted the credit bureaus and every financial institution involved. Every fraudulent trail led to my sister and her husband. My father opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His gaze flicked from my mother to my sister back to his plate. My sister was crying for real now, not the controlled, pretty crying from before. The raw, panicked kind that comes when you know you're caught. Her husband tried to pull her up from her chair. "Let's just go," he muttered. "Sit down," I said quietly. He did. I told them the reason my sister and her husband were in such desperate need of money wasn't some noble story about medical bills and baby expenses. They had more than $90,000 in debt from bad investments and gambling, sports betting, shady cryptocurrency schemes, quick rich plans that turned into slow, grinding disasters. They'd maxed out cards, drained their accounts, and were close to being evicted. When legitimate options ran out, they didn't cut back. They didn't own their mistakes. They stole my identity instead. They used my name to apply for more credit, more loans. They even tried to take a second mortgage on my house using forged documents. That last attempt failed, luckily. I'd already set up fraud alerts on my property after catching the first wave of suspicious activity. By now, the restaurant around us felt distant. Plates clinked in some other world. Laughter floated up from some other table. Here, at ours, there was only silence. Then my mother finally found her voice. "How can you do this to your own pregnant sister?" she demanded, voice thin and sharp. "How can you accuse her of these things? Do you have any idea what this stress is doing to the baby?" I looked straight at her. "Did you know?" I asked. The question just hung there. She could have said no. She didn't. Her face told me what her mouth didn't. My father still wasn't looking at me. They'd known. Maybe not every detail, but enough. This birthday request wasn't spontaneous. It was part of the plan. Their way out. If they could convince me to sell my house and hand over the money, their problem would vanish. I'd be the family hero. They'd be safe. I told them the police investigation was ongoing. My lawyer had calculated the total damages, legal fees, disputed interest, credit score damage at around $120,000. I was pursuing the case, all of it. My sister grabbed from my arm. She was begging now. She said they'd been desperate. They meant to pay it all back. It had just gotten out of control. Did you think about me at all? I asked her. When you were forging my name? When you put my home and my future on the line? Did it cross your mind what would happen if I hadn't caught it? If those loans defaulted, I would have owed the money. My credit would have been trashed. I could have lost the house. My career could have taken a hit. You risked my entire life to gamble your way out of a hole you dug yourselves into. My father tried a different tactic. He said I was being selfish. That family helps each other. He brought up the time I'd stayed with them after college, the money they'd loaned me when I was younger. I pulled my phone back out and opened my banking app. Every transfer I'd ever made to repay those loans. Every rent payment for those 6 months after college. I turned the screen toward him. I paid you back every cent, I said quietly. With interest. I've never stolen from you. I've never put your home at risk. So tell me, when exactly do we get to talk about what you owe me? One cousin, the one who'd been cheering the loudest earlier, tried to step in. Said something about forgiveness, about moving on, about this being a family matter. I turned to him. If I stole $100,000 from you, I asked, and used your name to take out loans and almost put your house up as collateral, would you just forgive and forget because we're related? He didn't answer. My mother was crying now, saying I was tearing the family apart, that I was choosing money over blood, that the stress was hurting the baby, and I'd regret this for the rest of my life. My voice shook a little, but my words were clear. I've thought about that, baby, I said. For 3 weeks, I've thought about what kind of life that child will have with parents who think stealing from family is okay, with grandparents who help them do it. I've spent my whole life being told I matter less than my sister. I'm done playing that role. I pushed my chair back, took out my wallet, counted enough cash to cover only my own meal, and put it on the table. This pays for my dinner, I said. The rest of the bill is a family problem. You're all so good at making financial decisions for other people. You can figure it out. And then I walked out. I heard someone call my name behind me. I didn't turn around. 2 weeks later, the fallout was in full swing. My phone had blown up the night of the dinner. Calls, texts, voicemails. Some told me I'd gone too far. Some begged me to think about the baby. Some tried to downplay everything. It's just money. We're family. You're not actually going to press charges, right? My mother left a 20-minute voicemail, mostly sobbing, repeating that she was heartbroken over the man I'd become. I blocked all of them. My lawyer called the next morning. The bank had sent more evidence. There had been multiple attempts to access my accounts, phone calls where my brother-in-law pretended to be me, trying to get balance info, attempts to add themselves as authorized users to my cards. The bank's security had blocked most things, not all. The detective on my case told me they had more than enough proof for criminal charges. The district attorney was reviewing everything. My sister and her husband hired a lawyer of their own. Within days, he reached out to mine with their first offer. They'd admit what they did. They'd pay me back in monthly installments. If, and only if, I agreed to drop the criminal charges. I refused. 3 days later, my mother showed up at my house. She rang the bell, knocked, yelled, cried. She stayed on my porch for almost 40 minutes. She screamed that I was destroying my sister's life. that my stubbornness was putting the pregnancy at risk, that if anything happened to the baby, it would be my fault. I sat on my couch, listening to her muffled voice through the door, and called the police. I filed a trespassing complaint. The extended family began to pick sides. Most of them went where you might expect. It's easier to blame the person who refuses to go along than the ones who started the fire, but a few reached out quietly. One cousin told me she'd had money disappear a couple of years ago and had always suspected my sister, but never had proof. An uncle texted that he understood what I was doing, even if he couldn't say it out loud to everyone else. The most unexpected messages came from people on the edges of my life. An old high school friend who'd heard something through someone else. Co-workers I'd half opened up to. My ex-wife, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. She wrote, "I always thought your family treated you badly. I'm glad you're finally standing up for yourself." Work became my shelter. My boss knew some of what was happening and let me take lawyer calls during the day. My co-workers showed up in small, practical ways. A coffee on my desk. A quiet, "How are you holding up?" without pushing for details. At home, everything felt different. Quieter, lighter. I started changing things around the house. Repainting walls I'd kept neutral because I thought family might come over. Getting rid of furniture my ex-wife had liked, but I'd always quietly disliked. For the first time, I asked myself, what do I want this place to feel like for me? I turned one room into a little studio space. Almost empty, clean, mine. I also started therapy. Sitting in that office, I laid everything out. Childhood favoritism, that restaurant scene, the way my parents had twisted support into leverage for years. My therapist listened. Then she said something that stuck. This is the first time in your life you're setting a real boundary. It's going to hurt. That doesn't mean it's wrong. A month after the birthday dinner, things escalated again. The charges were filed. My sister and her husband were arrested. They were released on bail that my parents paid by taking out, a loan against their own house. I learned all this from an uncle who decided to keep me updated on family events. I was very deliberately not being invited to. On the civil side, my lawyer increased the damages to about $160,000 after uncovering more fraudulent attempts. My parents changed tactics again. They sent a longtime family friend to talk to me. Someone who'd known me since I was a kid. Someone they clearly hoped I would listen to. He called and asked if we could meet just for coffee, just to talk. I agreed, partly out of curiosity. He spent almost an hour gently trying to push me toward forgiveness. Your sister's devastated. She made mistakes, sure. But prison? The baby. Think of the baby. Family is complicated. Can't you find it in your heart to show mercy? I asked him one question. When did my parents ask you to talk to me? He hesitated, then admitted 2 days after your birthday, before the police, before the lawyers. So even then, they hadn't been thinking about accountability. They'd been thinking about damage control, about managing me, about making sure I stayed soft and compliant. I finished my coffee, thanked him for his time. This is the last personal conversation we'll have, I told him. You're a good man, but I'm done letting them send people to handle me. Meanwhile, the extended family group chats were apparently imploding. A cousin told me people had started checking their own credit reports, and some had found suspicious activity. Not as bad as what happened to me, but enough to make them nervous. My sister's pregnancy was having complications from what I heard. Stress-related issues, partial bed rest. Before I blocked her email as well, my mother managed to send me one long, vicious message. Somewhere in the middle of it was a single line that sank deep. If this baby dies, it will be on your hands. I took that sentence to therapy and repeated it out loud. My therapist looked at me and said, your sister made these choices before there was ever a pregnancy. You didn't forge anything. You didn't open those accounts. You're not causing consequences. You're just not absorbing them for her. It didn't make the pain vanish, but it made it feel cleaner, less poisoned by guilt. Back at home, the atmosphere kept shifting. For the first time, I started inviting friends over. Game nights, movie nights, just coffee. I'd always avoided hosting before. Part of me had been waiting for my family's approval. Another part had been trying to keep the house neutral in case they ever decided to show up. Now, this place was entirely for the people who actually treated me like a person, not a walking safety net. One afternoon, my lawyer called with new information. My sister's lawyer had made another offer. This time, it was more serious. They'd sign a full written admission of everything they'd done. They'd agreed to pay full restitution over 10 years with interest. They'd accept probation and a criminal record if I would ask the prosecutor to reduce the charges so they'd avoid actual prison time. My lawyer, being practical, laid it out plainly. If they go to trial and are convicted, there's a real chance they declare bankruptcy afterward. You might never see much of your money. With this deal, you'd almost certainly get it back, and they'd still have criminal records. They wouldn't be walking away clean. I haven't decided yet. There's a part of me, the part that was trained from childhood to smooth things over, to be the reasonable one, that whispers, take the deal. Don't be cruel. Isn't this enough? But there's another part of me, the one that stood up in that restaurant with a phone in his hand and a lifetime of being second best behind him. That part says they were perfectly willing to ruin you. They counted on you being too soft to fight back. Why do they still deserve your protection? I have a meeting with the prosecutor next week. I've decided I'll make my final choice after that. I want all the facts, all the implications laid out in front of me. And then I'll decide. Not based on guilt. Not based on pressure. Based on what I can live with when I look in the mirror. In the meantime, I did something I've wanted to do for years. I booked a solo trip to Europe. 3 weeks. Just me. No family schedule, no compromise, no being dragged somewhere.